me. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to If Only, an intellectual freedom colloquy. I'm Sam Helmick, and I am delighted to be in community today with Tracey Thompson. Hi, Tracey. How you doing?
I am doing really great, Sam. It's really good to have this opportunity to meet you and talk with you today.
I'm excited to learn with you and from you today, too. And I was hoping for our audience, you might be willing to tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you're doing.
As you said, my name is Tracey Thompson. I'm currently the director for collection management system and material distribution services for King County Library System. We're a large library system here in Washington State. We have 51 locations, and we're one of the top circling libraries in the U.S. Not the first one, but someday. Um, it's a really vibrant community. I love living here in the Pacific Northwest. I originally grew up in Iowa, so not too far from you. I am a military spouse or retired military spouse, so we've been all over, and I've had the opportunity to work in libraries, military libraries overseas, in academic libraries and public libraries stateside. I've been in libraries for probably about 20 years now.
Wow. Well, thank you for your service and your family's service. It sounds like a lot of the work of your family is incredibly outward facing, and I appreciate the wealth of perspective that you'll bring to this conversation. We're gonna tackle 10 questions together, and I appreciate pauses along the way. As we navigate the waters, I'm going to start with one. I don't think I'm starting with a softball either. I was curious how you feel intellectual freedom contributes to a thriving society.
Intellectual freedom is really the cornerstone of democracy. It fosters innovation. It's really critical to thinking and exchange of diverse ideas. When individuals have the freedom to explore, question, and express themselves, it leads to a more dynamic and really kind of flexible and adaptable, empathetic community that can navigate really the complexities that we're facing today. Without intellectual freedom, you have a group or a government that is dictating what people think, what their values are, and even how they feel.
That's an excellent point. And you're hitting a lot of really high notes there, how we think, how we feel. So I'm curious, can you share a good feeling story about a time that intellectual freedom was a positive impact on an organization or an institution that you were connected with?
We had, I really had to kind of figure out what story to use for this because there's just been so many. But we had recently, we have an office of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they kind of headed up a booth at our local, one of the local pride parades in our community. Um, and we offered queer books for checkout. And we had such overwhelmingly positive feedback from the community, really expressing how impactful it was to see themselves represented in literature and the books that we were providing. And this isn't always something that's been available. People haven't always seen themselves reflected in collections, and it's really kind of critical that they see this. It's there's so many stories that people talk about. I felt alone. And feedback that authors get from readers where they talk about how they felt alone until they read this book that had a character that was like them. And it was experiencing the same things that they were experiencing. And it really helped them build a connection and understand that, they're part of community and may not be by them. Don't always have to have that aloneness.
Can I just linger here to say how much I'm loving the interplay of intellectual freedom here, right? I love stories. In fact, as I run for presidency, my tagline is "Our stories are worth sharing." And I've been thinking about that a lot about as curators and collectors of stories. But it sounds like in your work, you're opening yourself up to continue to hear the stories of those who are impacted by representation of themselves and how they feel seen in their public spaces. And That's pretty brilliant. It's nice to understand that this is a dialogue. The stories never stop. Yeah.
Books, books are so impactful on our community. And there was, oh gosh, I just saw something on Facebook the other day uh, that talks about, let me see if I can find it for you really quick.
Thank you.
Um, it was, it talked about the impacts of libraries. It says this person posted, it said, I love public libraries because they are built on the principle that books are so important and so necessary to human flourishing that access to them cannot be dependent upon your income.
Oh,
It really kind of emphasizes how important books can be to people, and to see yourselves represented is just such an amazing thing, and such a critical thing, really. And everyone deserves that.
well, and I think that because stories are critical and they are visceral and they're kind of like the guiding stars or even like the oars by which we navigate our lives. That means sometimes they're tricky and they're complex and they're hard, right? So it leads me to the question of uh, when you've been doing this work, are there challenges that you've observed regarding intellectual freedom? And if so, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how communities can address those challenges.
I think one of the challenges that one of the major ones we're facing right now is really this notable shift that we're seeing over the past few years. Previously, patrons would bring in a book that they themselves have checked out and
Mhm.
express concern because that content didn't align with their values.
Right.
However, what is really concerning is this trend that's emerged where national organizations are attempting to impose their values on communities throughout the US. They're
Right.
instructing local chapters how to complete challenge forms. We're providing lists of books to contest. So it used to be, libraries might get a few at a time. Now they're getting hundreds of challenges, which is just inundating them and really impacting their capacity to be able to answer them. And this is often, these challenges are under the guise of protecting children. They may
Mm.
resort to sensationalism. And of course, everyone wants to protect our children, but what they're missing is every family has the right to decide what's appropriate for their family, and what meets their values. However, they don't have the right to decide that for someone else, because what fits one family value may not fit another. And again, this is protected under our First Amendment right. um, One of the ways communities can really work to address this is, one, gain a comprehensive understanding of how libraries are bound by the First Amendment. There's certain legalities we have to follow. It's considered a violation of the First Amendment for us to discriminate on a book based on its race. Um, and let me make a side note here. We often talk about books with intellectual freedom, but this really includes all material. So books, movies, audiobooks, digital materials are included under intellectual freedom.
That's an
Um,
excellent point to make.
we so often talk about books, but it's all encompassing. Um, and talking, looping back, also talking about, not every book is going to resonate with every individual. Is it essential to recognize those personal preferences shouldn't dictate what's deemed appropriate for others. Um,
Right.
and libraries are not only willing, but we're enthusiastic about assisting patrons to find materials that'll align with their preferences. So if this book isn't right for you, that's great. Just as you have the right to access this book, you have the right not to check that book out. And then we can find materials that help meet your needs. Um, mhm.
Can I mentally just applaud you too because you're bringing some new concepts to me as we're talking about yeah, it's programs, it's displays, it's DVDs. Sure, you're talking to me about the variety of formats that this conversation encompasses, but I also noticed that we keep coming back to some really strong intellectual points too, where free read people read freely, but free people also think freely, and you're adding newer concepts like they value freely. They feel freely. And I think sometimes that, for me, in my neck of the woods, has been lost in the conversation. We think of it as a very cerebral process, but it's incredibly visceral and connected to your own speech as well.
Mhm.
So I agree with you. As we continue to have these conversations, we have to really hone down or widen, even potentially, depending on what we're discussing at that point. What are we discussing here, and whose right is being infringed upon if we don't include, right?
Very much so.
Yeah, I think that's just tremendous. And do you think I'm going to ask a sub question because I'm fascinated to know what your thoughts are on this? Do you think that that's invariably messy because it's just so human?
Very messy. Anything to do with because you can't separate people from their emotions.
Yeah.
So it gets very messy, and our values sometimes can be very contradictory from each other.
Mm,
A book I've used a lot because I go out and do a lot of community engagement and speaking to our community about intellectual freedom. An example I use is Into the Night Kitchen by Marie Sendak, which is a picture book that is often banned, throughout the years. And it's this wonderful story about this little boy who's dreaming at night. And in his dreams, he falls out of his pajamas and into the kitchen where, if I remember right, they bake him. He falls into like the mixing bowl and gets this pilot outfit. But while
yeah.
he's falling from his pajamas to the kitchen, he is and nothing is hidden. And so there are some families whose values are negatively impacted by that because they value modesty in the body being covered. There's other families who their value is nudity is natural. And there's nothing wrong with it. So, these are seemingly contradictory values. And while this book may not be right for one set of families, for one family, it may be perfectly fine for another family. And that's where we have to really be empathetic. We have to be compassionate, understanding that different people think differently, and that's okay. That's what makes our country great and strong.
Well said. It makes me wonder if like libraries have to continue to try to meet being so much for so many and ubiquitously. It kind of leads into our next question about like the digital age and what role that we play in this age. And I'm curious if you feel like the digital world has made intellectual freedom easier or harder. Do you observe any positive or negative impacts because of the new digital terrain that we occupy and engage in?
Yes, to all of that.
Mhm.
It makes it easier,
Okay.
it makes it harder. Where it makes it easier is it really, when it's used responsibly, it can really enhance intellectual freedom by expanding access to information. It can foster some of those global dialogues and conversations. I mean, we're able to connect. I mean, you and I are having conversations, and we're in separate parts of the country right now.
Yeah.
We're able to converse with people across the world in ways that we couldn't 20 years ago. It also presents challenges with dissemination of misinformation and increased censorship. Communities can work together to tackle these with really working on digital literacy programs, advocating for online spaces that not only that embrace diverse perspectives. Add into this
Yeah.
advances in artificial intelligence. While it,
Right.
yeah, I mean, it's really kind of a complex situation. While it broadens our access to information, it can also at the same time constrain the range of available knowledge. Social
Right.
media is really a great example of this, where content can be customized to an individual's profile. So how you even the length of time you view a post can impact the algorithm. Your likes, your what you follow, subscribe to, and this customization may inadvertently hinder you from encountering or exploring additional vital information that falls outside the scope of your established profile. And so there's concerns about that, and libraries really need to be at the table, um, with companies like Microsoft and Google, who are working in these areas to help shape policies and the direction that we're going with intellectual freedom.
Oh, you've made me want to linger here too, Tracy. This is fantastic. Because yes, we are information scientists in an information age, and if we're not at the table as these algorithmic pens are built up around us and those we serve, it makes me wonder if even the very definition of information changes. What is information versus content versus data versus knowledge? Feel like conversations that are taking place without some of the key players sharing a voice. And I would identify at least both two players being information scientists and those we serve, right?
Mhm. And I know there's
Wow.
a lot of concern about like the bubbles we're building around ourselves,
Right.
with social media and online content, that it's geared towards our current thoughts, our current values, and not opening us up to that diversity and understanding some opposing opinions, which we often learn more about ourselves when we learn about other people's values and other people's cultures.
Well said. Yeah, it's the weight that we put on like a ratioed tweet. Almost feels similar to me as like a peer-reviewed source in some ways. And on one hand, while it is peer-reviewed, what we mean by that versus how it's being executed in that instance are two very different things. And so it kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier with making sure that the good work is being done to ensure that folks can evaluate and use tools to understand information and to sift it. Um, so it makes me wonder, as a contributor to some of the communities that are doing that work, as a leader, how do you encourage, I guess, like both open dialogue but also diverse perspectives while ensuring that the discourse is respectful, right? Because if I can come in and I say, I want you to use this, I'm going to have this class, these are the sources. You and I both know we're doing the good diligence. We're doing the due diligence to find those resources, but how do we build that trust and that openness to kind of back and forth those resources? I guess if I had to give an example to this question.
It's through a lot of what we're doing here in our system in the King County Library System is we've implemented kind of this year-long campaign called Celebrate Freedom to Read. And our goal is to involve really working with various community groups, engaging them in dialogues, having conversations to really kind of build those positive relations. This is a great time for us to have those conversations with them. Uh, Really kind of some meaningful conversations around the First Amendment, about intellectual freedom, about the importance of diversity in our collection. And this is going along with the work that we're doing in DEI, and really centering our most impacted communities, because you can't separate intellectual freedom from DEI. And it's really looking at, the heart of our initiative is the fundamental belief that public libraries serve
Yeah.
as an inclusive space. We offer every individual access to ideas, information tailored to their needs, cultures, and values.
Yeah.
We're really emphasizing that concept of window, doors, and mirrors,
Yes.
understanding the importance of providing collections that reflect the diversity of our community. Everyone, again, deserves themselves to be represented. We've spoken about that, and really explore windows that offers insight into other communities and discover those doors that can facilitate the learning and development of empathy for others so we can step through and really build those relationships. And so we're trying to have those conversations right now. Our system has yet to face a major challenge, so we're really trying to get ahead of it and build some of that positive reinforcement out there. We're reaching out to community leaders. We recently did a training for one of our cities in our service area. So that was really excited that they invited us out to do that. And, this goes along with our outreach and the DEI work we're doing, where we're reaching out to our communities and developing co-creation. So really
Okay.
trying to understand what their needs are and how we can tailor library services to meet their needs.
Wow, I am checking this out. I'm making copious notes right now. I got to check out this year-long initiative, and it speaks to my outreach heart that you go to the communities and you hear what they need from us, and then the services are a reflection of that conversation. So it is literally a community-driven initiative with your library. But I also am very fascinated about the preemptive work you're doing. It makes me think of like an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, but then also like what I'm seeing legislatively with other states where they're doing what I'm liking to coin as joyful offense, where like virtue bills are being written. We're introducing conversations about ebook pricing and maybe digital content regulation, or at least enabling libraries to have a seat at the table simply because these are good conversations to be having when we're not amidst unprecedented book bans, right? These are causes worth of celebration and reflection and consideration because it is complex but essential work. And so I'm really curious about, you know, putting you on the spot and asking if there's been like a highlight of that year long initiative that has really struck your heart, or is it top of mind while I have you?
I think one of the highlights is we're really trying to reframe the conversation. You know, often libraries take this very confrontational staff stance. We don't ban books. We have something that offends everyone. And instead, we're turning that around and framing it positively that we're protecting your First Amendment right. We're providing you with information that meet your needs. And you know, and it's being picked up throughout our county. We've been working with one of our neighboring organizations who actually, I'll be very honest and give them credit. I stole the idea from
Or
you know,
borrow, as we say in the biz.
a library started it. You know, we stole the concept and, you know, we're building upon it. So instead of doing Banned Book Week, we celebrate our freedom. And one of our staff members had the idea to make it a long year campaign. And so it's just really been a really great experience. You know, we've done, again, many community presentations. We did a panel uh, with one of our local university or our local community colleges and schools where we have some book talks and we're working on getting some speakers set up for the next year around this topic. So again, just really trying to take this opportunity to build some of those positive community relationships.
That's brilliant, Tracy. And it's essential work, and I think it's work that we've always been called to do. I think about, is it Article 3 of the Library Bill of Rights that says that we're supposed to sort of challenge challenges
Mhm.
everywhere, right? So these aren't mic drops. This isn't even actually reactionary. It's what we're called to do as professionals in the field. So we're doing that good work. But to preface this next question, I think it's important for me to like articulate in my head, our founders recognized that we were going to need structures or tools in place in order to attempt this system of governance. So, like free schools, free post, free libraries, free press, which come with policies, right? So, you and
Mhm.
I can do this really great work. But I'm fascinated on your take of like what policies are essential to ensure intellectual freedom and that those mechanisms are still in place. Are there any like policies you've identified that are foundational to this entire enterprise?
Well, I think you mentioned one, and these aren't necessarily policies, but they're kind of core documents. You know, the Library Bill of Rights, the Freedom to
Mhm.
Read Statement. The Freedom to
Yes.
Read Statement was written in actually 1953 in response to McCarthyism. It's the 70th anniversary right now, and if you read it, it actually kind of scarily enough reads as if it was written today. So it's really applicable with the challenges we're facing today. I think policy wise, libraries really, it's essential that you have uh, strong collection and selection policies, as well as established material evaluation policies and procedures. And you're consistent with those. You're
Mm.
consistent on how you address each issue, um, and really have established what that process is of when someone comes in with a challenge, that you train staff, that you give them the tools that they need to be able to respond to this. Um, And really one of the major things that we have in place that support us is the First Amendment. It really provides some clear protections, and often we forget to talk about it. You know, and you mentioned several laws that are being passed across the states. It's really kind of concerning.
Yeah.
These laws are often in violation of the First Amendment. There's several states, I know Missouri is one that's mandated removal of materials deemed harmful to minors. Well, what is
Yeah.
harmful to minors? Again, we talked about differing values. What,
Yes.
they put a lot of hyperbole around it, such as that book I mentioned earlier, Into the Night Kitchen. That book has been banned based on pornography. Um,
Right.
how do you define pornography? And it's actually only the courts who can decide if a material is obscene or not. A community member can't, I can't, you can't. It's only the courts. And they use the Miller's test, the three-prong test, which
Right.
includes community standards. So what may be obscene in one state may not necessarily be obscene in another. Um,
Right. And when is erasure harmful too? Right.
mhm.
I remember one of my friends, Sandy Levins, wrote a really great book called "Was It the Chocolate Pudding?" And it's about kiddos sneaking and eating some chocolate pudding, and then they're told mom and dad are going to separate. And it's a healthy separation story, but there's that moment where they think it's because they ate the chocolate pudding, and that book was questioned because of the dismantling of the nuclear family. It's like this book doesn't dismantle anything; it examines family, right? And so I think about, as a child of divorce myself, the lack of those stories creates harm to minors too, potentially,
Very
right?
much so, because again, it's that isolation. It's I'm the only one experiencing this. I'm weird or odd because I have these feelings and no one else does. Whereas, if we provide these stories to kids, they can see they're not the only one that's had this experience, and it can help them work through that. So yeah, it's really critical we provide children with these. And again, it may not be appropriate for one child, but it may be for another. If you have two 13-year-olds, you can't hand them the same book and expect it to be to meet their current needs.
Precisely. So
Mhm.
you and I have examined together like what you're doing in your circles and spheres of influence and work. We kind of explored what is policy and initiative driven elements that can support intellectual freedom. But I'd love to kind of take this next question down to the level of individual. What do you imagine individuals can do to champion and promote intellectual freedom in their communities and circles?
I think it's by starting to have the dialogue. Start by having conversations. Attend your school board meetings, your public library meetings. Let the boards know your views on intellectual freedom, especially when it comes up as a topic. Contact your legislatures. Let them know your thoughts and how important you feel intellectual freedom is. The most important thing you can do is vote. Speak through the ballot. Let through initiatives, through candidates, let them know what your values are. By having those conversations, by being respectful of differing opinions, learning about other cultures, we can really, help build that vibrant society.
That's wonderful. So it sounds like presence, which I know is a high commodity, but it's so is intellectual freedom.
Well, and
So
actually,
yeah,
we talk about, all the banning and censorship and the increase that's happened over, the last 2 years. I mean, it's just skyrocketed, but it's only a few voices.
right,
Over 70% of material actually, or I'm sorry, 70% people opposed to banning books, but
right.
they're not speaking out. And that's the difference, is we have
Ah,
voices who are speaking out for banning, but they're in the minority. So we need those who are supporting intellectual freedom to speak up.
so there's Tracy and Sam as the individuals, and we're talking about what individuals can do. But when we think about ourselves as the collective, as the public, what can we do when we think about like complex socio-political discourse and landscapes that we're all kind of traversing and trying to operate in? How can we as the public kind of create conducive environments for intellectual freedom and its support and discourse?
I think is, coming together with organizations and developing the partnerships. Because as individuals, sometimes it can be difficult. Well, even an individual can enact change. So I don't want to belittle that. But there's power in coming together with groups, with organizations, supporting United Against Banned Books as an organization, an offshoot of ALA that's working with us. And again, working with your legislatures uh, to really protect intellectual freedom. There's 2 states right now that have actually are banning books, which is always
Right.
kind of a tongue twister. Illinois and California have put
Yeah.
in place, and
Yeah.
actually going for the U.S. Congress, they're putting in supports. Or it's going, a proposal is going forth to provide dollars for schools who are fighting censorship. So we're seeing
And
some hope out there.
yeah, which kind of leads me into my penultimate question. You have made me jazzed, Tracy. Like I'm hearing stories about year-long initiatives to celebrate,
Mhm.
right? Our freedoms, which feels awesome that we have this moment to come together and celebrate. You're telling me about how folks are feeling seen and how we're procuring materials in the space of need and interest and want where our communities organically exist, whether that's a pride parade or like a creation and event. And so I thank you. You've uplifted me today in our conversation. I am very curious about what has you specifically jazzed right now about the intellectual freedom landscape.
I think, part of what has had me jazzed are the conversations I'm having and the support that we're getting from the community. It's just been really phenomenal. We've had so many groups that have just responded positively to our presentations. Our library board is just super supportive of intellectual freedom and if really are proud of the work that they're doing to support intellectual freedom, and having conversations with people across the U.S. with yourself, with other librarians, with community members, who are really wanting to take a stance and make a difference, and seeing the groups that are really fighting for intellectual freedom and some of the countersuits we're seeing to challenge the laws that are really trying to bring censorship forward. That has me jazzed. There's hope. So we'll get there.
And so before we conclude with our last question, can I just take this moment to thank you personally as an ALA member and as a person in the field, but also as a person that is very, very keenly interested in free people reading, feeling, valuing freely. I appreciate that you have uh, stepped into the slate for the Intellectual Freedom Roundtable for chairship, and I wish you well in the journey because your energy and verve and passion for this has long and broad impact. So I just wanted to say thank you because you know exactly what you're walking into, and you are still answering the call, and that's incredible and inspiring. My last question for you, though, as you kind of are on a couple of different journeys, professionally, personally, giving me a bit of your afternoon today. What are you learning? I always am fascinated about what people are learning.
Gosh, I've learned every day. Yeah, I come in and I learn something new, and I'm like, oh, I can go home now. Um,
Love it.
my boss doesn't quite let me do that, but um, I'm like, I learned my thing for the day I'm done. So I'm constantly really working on expanding my knowledge around artificial intelligence, its implications for intellectual freedom, both good and bad. I mean, it's a fascinating field. It's something I've been interested in for many, many years now. Um, and really, again, crucial for libraries to be actively participating in these processes and involved in the conversations around it. um, who knows where it's going to take us. It's really kind of amazing. I mean, Chat GPT. I thought, oh, it's just for if you don't want to write, you put something in to write for you. My IT director did a demonstration. It'll write code, and as he emphasized, it's a good place to get started if you're stuck. So I've been guilty of it a time or two myself. On a personal level,
Yeah.
I'm kind of delving into propagating houseplants.
Ooh, yeah.
Plants are like books. You can never have too many.
Huh?
I've had some really great successes with passos, and so I'm now trying to see if I could propagate a Monstera deliciosa, which I think is the funnest name for a plant.
Sarah Deliciosa.
So,
I feel like Hermione Granger might have used that a few times. I'm trying to say it out loud in my head.
oh my God,
that's
it's
that's
just one of those
brilliant.
really fun words.
Yeah. I wish you well in the propagation too. That
Well,
sounds
thank you.
exciting. Yeah. Um, is there anything else while we have the privilege of your mind and time and voice that you'd like to share with those who will partake in these videos?
I think it's just really important to understand the legalities that surround intellectual freedom with libraries. We often talk about it as kind of a mission, a value, a charge, but there's also, the legal restrictions that we have to follow. We're limited public forums, meaning that people can come have the right to receive information at libraries with privacy. It's a safe place to receive information about controversial ideas. We don't judge. It's important that we don't judge and are careful about conversations we have when people are checking out items. An
Mhm.
analogy I use is I have a four-generational household. So when we go grocery shopping, we go grocery shopping.
Mhm.
We have this massive overflowing cart because we're 7 people. Inevitably, the cashier or the bagger comments on how much groceries we're buying. And I'm just like,
Mm,
that's really kind of off-putting
yeah,
to me.
right.
So, and they're trying to be conversational. I'm like, we need to, as librarians and library staff, be mindful when people are checking out a stack of books, what
Yeah.
we're commenting about it, because we're doing it with great intentions, trying to
Mhm.
build those conversation and connections, but we don't know why they're checking out the information, what it may be. Even if it's, something seemingly innocent as a romance book, maybe this
Mhm.
is, something that's really kind of challenging for them.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful about, making it a safe place for people. Um, so thank you. Oh, go ahead.
No, just it blows me away. It comes back to the feeling how you wanna feel. At
Mhm.
our desk, we'll say, "Did the library have everything you want today?" versus, "Did you find everything?" Because it does 2 things. The first one is it invites you to know it's nobody's at fault. If you didn't, we're here to help. But the second is it sort of plants the seed that if you did, wow, your library really showed up for you today. It gave you everything you wanted. And so
Oh,
even just how we frame sentences and allow people to feel what they wanna feel in the space and not really kind of pen that in is remarkable. You give me so much to think about, Tracy. Yeah, thank you
well,
for
thank
this
you.
opportunity today.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you for inviting me to this conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
me too. And I look forward to sharing it with you and others once we post this online. And I wish you well in your intellectual freedom journeys as well as your plant propagations.
Just keep
Thank
them.
you.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Bye.